Over the past few decades, a secret battle has been going on in Central America. Across its pristine rainforests, amphibians have been disappearing. Since the 1970s, 50 of the region's endemic amphibians have become extinct, often rapidly, often without warning. And whilst this pattern of amphibian extinction has repeated itself across the globe, Central America has been hit harder than anywhere else. So what is causing the demise of its amphibians? Well, today we'll venture across Central America, go through every extinct amphibian and pinpoint the reasons for their demise. Starting in the Valley of Mexico with Talox leopard frog. Adapting to the lake environment of Xochimilco and Chalco, this animal always had a very small distribution, but was common since at least the time of the Aztecs. However, as Mexico City's population exploded over the 20th century, the wetland habitats it depended on were destroyed in favor of roads and housing. Additionally, introduced predatory fish are known to prey upon the tadpoles of Mexico City's amphibians, and the waters also happen to be some of the most polluted in the world. These factors all culminated to the last sighting in 1981, yet more surveys are needed to confirm its extinction. Heading east we reach the Sierra Madre de Oaxaca, a stronghold of amphibian diversity. In fact, the state of Oaxaca is home to at least 164 amphibians, most of whom are found nowhere else on Earth. One of such was the Oaxacan fringe-limbed tree frog. Found in just a small area of the Sierra de Juarez, it was only seen once in 1962. And whilst members of this group are often difficult to find, exhaustive surveys with no sightings mean that the animal is almost certainly extinct. However, the date of extinction is unknown, as these surveys only started in 2006. So what caused this animal to disappear? Well, its extinction was almost certainly due to chytridiomycosis. In case you don't know what that is, let me explain. Chytridiomycosis is an amphibian killing disease, which is caused by the chytrid funguses BD and B. sal. As of 2025, this disease has wiped out 166 amphibian species, and has resulted in the decline of over 2,500 others. For some species, the disease doesn't affect them, whilst others have a 100% risk of death, and no effective treatment is known. Only discovered in 1993 in Queensland, Australia, it has likely been around for a very long time. The earliest record was of a Titicaca water frog specimen collected in 1863. Strangely, however, although it tested positive, it showed no signs of the disease. This suggests a more deadly strain appeared since then, and two main theories explain its global spread. The first is that the African clawed frog was the vector, and its global use in pregnancy tests caused the spread of the disease. The other theory is that it was spread via the pet trade. This idea is backed up by the fact that the first outbreaks were in the USA, which is the biggest destination for the amphibian trade. No matter its exact origin, it's clear that it spread out from the old world, whose amphibians have a tolerance. The patchy distribution of chytridiomycosis can be explained by its specific needs. To thrive, it requires both high humidity and temperatures between 17 and 25 degrees Celsius, which is why cloud forests are so at risk. Instead of going through each one case by case, we can plot them on a map to trace chytrid spread. Beginning in the Sierra Madre de Oaxaca with the last sighting of the semi-aquatic frog in 1940, followed by the admirable Falsbrook salamander that same year, the Puebla tree frog in 1961, the Tapacoyan salamander in 1969, the voiceless tree frog in 1970, the claw-toothed salamander in 1976, the aquatic salamander and speckled tree frog in 1978, and the blue-eyed aquatic frog and the ceropelon frog in 1980. It must be noted that the date of the last sighting is not necessarily when the animal went extinct. With amphibians in particular, extinctions can come decades after the final sighting. For this reason, it's estimated that the chytrid fungus was already present in the mountains of Oaxaca by 1972. The devastation didn't stop there, however. Soon the disease reached the Sierra Madre del Sur, with a much lower amphibian diversity, having just 49 species. These hills were the victims of much fewer extinctions. And all three are salamanders. The Teotepec salamander last seen in 1964. Anita's Fallsbrook salamander in 1976, and the long-tailed minute salamander surviving until 1998. This last sighting of the species, however, was the first in over 18 years, and the population had already rapidly declined. Because of these varied dates, it's hard to estimate when the disease arrived, but I would say the time of arrival was the late 1970s. Blocked from moving north by dry winters and warm summers, the fungus instead made its way to the mountains of Chiapas. Although surprisingly, the only victim there appears to be Plectrophylla pincochila, who was last seen in 1954, making the timing of the fungus's arrival unknown. Unfortunately, as the disease made its way further south, the amphibians of Guatemala weren't so lucky. The first to disappear was the Haupa Fallsbrook salamander in 1976, followed by Craugastor milomylon in 1978, the brown Fallsbrook salamander in 1980, Bocourt's tree frog in 1984, Craugastor adamastus in 1985, and Craugastor trachydermis in 1989. Guatemala's decline in amphibians was first observed in the early 1980s, suggesting that's when the fungus arrived. Also from Guatemala was the salamander Bolita glossa nuspami, last seen in 1998. However, in its case, habitat loss was what ultimately led to its extinction. Continuing its spread, it reached Honduras, where it caused more extinctions than anywhere else, starting with the disappearance of the San Pedro rubber frog in 1968. The Sheridamoa streamside frog in 1974, the Cruz rubber frog in 1980, McCraney's rubber frog in 1989, the Corkine rubber frog, Craugastor saltuarius, and Craugastor olenchano in the early 1990s, Edapina bitolia in 1995, Rhinella chrysophora in 1996, and Craugastor epoxydius in 1999. With so many having been last seen in the early 1990s, there's no doubt that's the time when the fungus reached northern Honduras. Moving on, the disease bypassed El Salvador and Nicaragua only to resurface in Costa Rica. Since it's the most cloud forest dense country in the world, it provides one of the best accounts of the disease. The first known victim was the past stubfoot toad. Inhabiting the hills in the vicinity of San Jose, this formerly abundant species suddenly vanished in the 1980s. This timing perhaps indicates that instead of spreading from the north, chytrid in Costa Rica was instead the result of an independent introduction. However, the best documented story is that of the golden toad. These stunning amphibians inhabited just half a square kilometer of the Monteverde cloud forest, though they seemed to be thriving. However, the population suddenly disappeared between the breeding seasons of 1987 and 1988, dropping from 1,500 to just 10. The next year, just a single individual was found. Since chytridiomycosis had not yet been identified, scientists believed a drought to be responsible, with one just so happening to coincide with their demise. Holdridge's toad also vanished in 1987, though luckily it was rediscovered in 2010. And 1 year after the golden toad's disappearance, the Atlantic rubber frog also went extinct. All of these extinctions got conservationists thinking about what could be causing the global decline in amphibians, though it would take another 3 years before that question was answered. And when it was, Panamanian conservationists, anticipating its arrival, rapidly began taking the nation's amphibians into captivity. But by then the disease had already reached Panama, wiping out Chief's toad, the Pico Blanco toad, Craugastor catalane, Craugastor rhyocobatrachis, the ghost flesh-bellied frog, and the splendid poison frog. Even after its identification, they still failed to save the Cherokee harlequin frog, Isthmohyla calypsa, and Bob's rubber frog. Additionally, Rab's fringe-limbed tree frog went extinct in 2016, after failing for almost a decade to breed in captivity. However, there were a few examples of success, including the Panamanian golden frog. Living further to the east, conservationists had enough time to collect a large number for a captive breeding program. The low maintenance cost and relative ease of breeding them makes captive breeding a good way to save amphibians, although until the disease can be eliminated, they stand no chance in the wild. The spread continued into South America, wiping out an even greater number of species, where the Andes provided the disease with the perfect conditions for spreading. Though today the frontier appears to be Chile's temperate rainforests. Home to some of the most genetically distinct frogs, it is particularly vulnerable. If you've watched this far, it's safe to say that you are a fan of amphibians. So if you want to find out about how fish evolved into amphibians in the first place, watch this video.